Okay, so did you get that all worked out? So we have the 6.5-inch propeller. So we're going to follow up here at the 100 grams. That's going to give us a spot right there. Let's go back to red so we can see it. Spot right there. So our head rating looks like it crosses right at 40 feet. What's our brake horsepower? Well, our brake horsepower pretty much falls right on that 1.5 horsepower. And so then we look at our efficiency. So I've got 65 here, I get 67 here. That looks about right in the middle of the two. So I'll probably say it's a 66% efficient pump. Okay, from there, let's take a look. This is just another of the same kind of pump curve. I pulled this, it's from a Gould's pump from ITT Industries. I hate this graph because they've got it on graph paper, but that's what you may end up running into. So one other kind of pump curve that I have seen and used before is right here, and this is more like the initial example that the book was showing you. And so this is, you look up here, there are our head curves, and then here's our axes for head. Here's our flow rate along the bottom. This flow rate's interesting because it gives it to it in GPM, but also cubic meters per hour, which was an interesting choice, especially since there's no metric here on the feet. Here's our efficiency curve. There's no numbers that doesn't work. I could read it over and it's like 200% efficient. That doesn't make any sense. If you come over here, I've got efficiency curve labeled out here. So you would read up, find it, and then read over. Here are our brake horsepower curves. And once again, we have 4 different pumps listed here. So there's an 8, an 11, a 14, a 16 on brake horsepower. There's brake horsepower here. We have this curve here called NPSH, which we had on the other graph that we didn't talk about. We'll talk about that later in the class. So what we have is 2 different pumps here, the Model 3333 pumps, and they're both run at 3,500 RPM. And so this one's got 8, 11, 14, 18. This one down here has 27, 35, 45, 54, and 62. It does label the curves though as head versus flow, efficiency, brake horsepower. And the way that we read this is pretty much the same as the other one. So let's say that we were using a CB511 pump at 6 gallons per minute. What we would do is we would just draw our line here at 6 gallons a minute. CB511 crosses here. If I read that over, probably say that head is somewhere 250 to 275 feet. This is a little bit smaller than a bigger picture, so we'll make the best of it. I got efficiency. I read that efficiency over here. Probably the efficiency is 38, 39%. Brake horsepower, we have to go to the 11 curve, read it over, and it's just about 1 horsepower. So the key with all of these is just realizing that you're going to have a head versus a flow rate curve, figuring out what flow rate you are, and then reading all the information off of the chart. And so one way that you have is like this one right here, where the curves are separated, but they have different axes that we have to read from. And that means we have to pay special attention to, are we reading from the right axis? And then the other one is one that we looked at earlier, and these are actually curves out of your book. You'll probably use these in your homework quite a bit, where once again, you do have all the information on there at once, but you have to pay attention to how you're measuring it. In this case, head versus flow rate are these magenta curves. And then we have these solid lines here. They're listed off of BHP, which means that's what we're measuring the brake horsepower off of. So now we're just measuring one axis in between these lines. And then here's our percentage, our little topographical curves. And so once again, we're measuring out where do we sit in between those. Especially with this kind of graph, the most important thing is to first find out where does that head and flow rate ratings cross. Because once you have that point there, then you just kind of rotate your frame of reference to figure out what the other parameters are for brake horsepower and for efficiency. And we'll come back to that NPSH curve later and deal with that, but right now we're just going to worry about those specific things.